This is an abandoned farm that I bought for $1 million. Today, we'll find out whether we can discover something valuable or end up in the red. First of all, let me say this. The result will surprise you. Subscribe to the channel and let's get started. I've just completed the purchase of a farm located in the center of our town. It cost us $1 million. I really hope we can make it profitable, and even if we don't, at least we won't end up with a huge loss. I can't wait to see what awaits us there, so let's not waste any time and head out. I decided to take the pickup truck with a trailer, just in case we need to haul away some trash or maybe some interesting finds. We also have a truck with a ramp and a special trailer for transporting machinery, in case we find any. The road to the farm leaves much to be desired, and this will definitely complicate the transportation of any equipment we find. As I approached the farm, I noticed that the area was overgrown with bushes and weeds. On the property itself, there were several large and many small sheds and shelters where useful things might be stored. I began inspecting the area in order, starting from the entrance and gradually moving inward. First, I ran to a small shed right by the entrance. It turned out to be empty, but it was too early to be disappointed. Nearby stood another, larger one. Inside, there were lots of building materials and a large locked container. I think we can get about $2,000 for it, which is already not bad. Around the container were building blocks, pipes, and 3 canisters, but unfortunately, all of them were empty. I also found several barrels and metal pipes that could definitely be sold for scrap. That would bring us around $500 more. Opposite stood pallets with boxes and buckets. It turned out to be paint. After checking the market price, I estimated all of it at around $1,500. Next to the large container stood a smaller one. I tried to open it, but couldn't. The handle was completely rusted. The inspection of this area was complete. In total, the things we found here could bring in up to $4,000. And that's just the beginning. I'm sure there's even more interesting stuff ahead. Next was a hangar, much larger than the previous buildings, but the entrance was heavily overgrown. I had to literally fight my way through the bushes. Inside, the first thing I noticed was a manual loader with cement blocks. The loader itself could be sold for around $1,500. In the center of the hangar stood a small container marked hazardous material. I didn't check the contents, but such containers typically go for about the same amount, $1,500. I continued inspecting and found many barrels, scrap metal, piles of garbage, and a large amount of paving stones. Among all this stood out a bright turquoise barrel. It was labeled as machinery oil. It was sealed and full. That was a pleasant surprise, as it's worth about $3,000. On the other side of the hangar, I found more building materials, a cement mixer that seemed to have been used frequently, a second manual loader, and many planks. Apparently, someone wanted to completely rebuild the hangar, but never got the chance. For us, this is a great find. Everything here is worth up to $10,000. But the discoveries didn't stop there. Around the shed, there were still many things scattered, from scrap metal to trash. I was especially interested in the gas installation behind the shed. It seemed to be used to power a generator, likely for repairing the building. At current prices, such an installation costs around $5,000. Moving further, I stumbled upon a pen, probably for sheep. Unfortunately, it was empty, which was a bit disappointing. But soon I again came across heaps of trash and scrap metal, and under a small metal shelter stood some kind of equipment. Coming closer, I realized it was a feed mixer, probably used for preparing livestock feed. Its value is around $2,000. Nearby were some pipes and an anvil. I don't think they'll sell for much, but it's still some profit. Opposite the shed was a container for tin cans and a large barrel. At first, I thought it was a water tank, but upon closer inspection, I realized it was a fuel station. It had been used to refuel equipment. Such units are expensive, I think no less than 20,000. Having checked half of the farm, I can say selling everything we've found here so far could bring up to $50,000. Considering we spent $1 million, the result is not very impressive so far. But it's too early to be discouraged. There's still plenty of interesting stuff ahead. In the center of the farm, I noticed a shelter under which stood a tractor, the first piece of equipment we've found. I was very excited and ran to check if it worked. It started without any problems and was fully operational. That means we can sell it for at least $60,000, a great find. Also under the shelter were boxes, likely containing building materials, and a small plow that was probably attached to this tractor. I decided to pull out the plow, tried to hook it up, and it turned out to be in excellent condition, so I just drove it to the farm entrance. Then I went deeper into the property. Behind some bushes, I noticed a small swamp with a log bridge across it. Crossing it, I reached a large hangar. Unfortunately, the road to it was blocked by rocks that had broken off a larger stone. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something large in the river. Getting closer, I realized it was a combine harvester. It was almost completely sunk in the swamp. These go for $200,000 or more. But reaching the cabin right now is impossible. We'll have to rent some equipment to pull it out later. For now, I headed to the hangar. It only opened on the third attempt. The doors were heavily rusted. Inside were two huge bulldozers. That made me very happy, since one of them alone costs about $300,000. And here were two. I tried starting one of them. It started easily, and the engine ran perfectly. That means we may have already recouped the cost of the farm. But the discoveries didn't stop there. I went to the largest shed and was stunned. Inside stood a huge tractor with a massive plow. That's it. We're definitely in the green. The tractor already had the key in the ignition, and when I turned it, I heard the powerful roar of the engine. It started right up. In addition to that, the shed had many boxes of seeds and fertilizers. These can be sold for good money, around $20,000. I decided to take them out immediately, brought up the pickup truck, and loaded everything. Then I checked around the shed and found a small room with a chainsaw, which will definitely come in handy later. And behind the shed stood the header from the sunken combine harvester. Also, behind some large bushes stood a truck with a trailer. I immediately tried to start it, and everything was great, but as I moved, it got stuck in the trash. I continued exploring the farm and found a small residential house. It was locked and the windows were boarded up. I couldn't look inside. Next to it stood a garage. Peeking through a crack, I saw some machinery. When I opened the gate, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was a Bentley inside, a premium car worth nearly $500,000. I was literally jumping for joy. Selling all this equipment will earn us a huge sum, but first, we need to haul it out. I got in the pickup and drove to my farm to get the truck and drop off the seeds and fertilizers on the way. Upon arrival, I parked the pickup near the hangar, got into the truck, and headed to the farm. Turning around on the site was difficult. Everything was buried in trash, but I managed. First, I loaded the tractor with the plow and delivered it. Upon returning, I decided to reverse in to avoid turning around. Next was the massive tractor, but it didn't fit on the platform along with the cultivator. So I loaded just the cultivator first and planned to come back for the tractor. So for now, we go to deliver the plow. When I arrived, I had to lower the plow to the ground. I used the first tractor, although the cultivator is a bit too big for it. It managed to drag it off. And I was right. After that, I returned for the massive tractor, loaded it up and transported it to our farm. Now it was time to move the bulldozers. However, the road leading to them was overgrown and blocked by rocks, so it had to be cleared first. I started by cutting down all the bushes that were obstructing the path. Then I got into the bulldozer itself and lowering the blade, began pushing the rocks toward the river, completely clearing the way. Once everything was ready, I loaded the bulldozer onto the trailer and delivered it to the farm. After that, I decided it was time to go to the city and rent equipment capable of pulling the combine harvester and the truck stuck in the river. For $15,000, I rented a heavy-duty tow truck. I think it will easily handle the task. I also hired a worker to help deliver the tow truck to our farm. Once the equipment was on site, I got behind the wheel and started recovering the truck. Fortunately, it wasn't stuck too badly and just needed a little adjustment. Once it was free, I got into the truck's cabin and drove it to the farm myself. Then I got into our truck with the low bed trailer and headed for the combine. I drove the tow truck around the other side of the farm, hooked the winch to the combine, and pulled it out of the swamp without much trouble. It was extremely dirty, no surprise, considering how long it had been underwater. I climbed into the cabin and tried to start it, and to my surprise, it started right up. Then I drove it onto the trailer, picking up the header along the way, and delivered everything to our farm. The only piece of equipment left was the second, smaller bulldozer. It also started on the first try, and I easily drove it onto the platform. However, for the return trip, I decided to take the Bentley, leaving the rest of the equipment in the hands of the workers. In the end, I returned from the purchase of this farm in a $500,000 car. We also found an entire fleet of machinery, and just from selling it, we can earn about $2 million. Additionally, for the sold items and scrap metal we found on the farm property, we'll get about $200,000 more. That means the total profit from everything we found could reach around $2,200,000. And all this after spending just $1 million on the farm. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.